So what's the real connection between all the media we watch and the crime that, let's be honest, both fascinates and scares us? It's a huge question, and for more than 100 years, some of the smartest people around have been trying to figure it out. Today, we're going to trace that entire incredible journey of thought.
All right, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll kick things off with our collective obsession with crime. Then we'll dive into the classic media effects debate. From there, we'll get into the heavier stuff, power and ideology, before looking at the game-changing idea of active audiences. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at how crime has become this wild, modern spectacle.
So let's start with a question that really gets to the heart of it all. I mean, we've all been there, right? 3 hours deep into a true crime documentary, and you just have to ask yourself, why can't I look away from this stuff?
And that leads to the bigger, more serious question, the one that's launched a century of research and some really fierce arguments. Is all this focus on crime actually doing us any harm?
So how did the very first thinkers try to tackle that? Well, they came up with a theory that was really simple, really powerful, and, as it turns out, incredibly hard to shake off: the idea of direct media effects. You gotta remember, back in the early 20th century, with movies exploding onto the scene, the question was often put just this bluntly. It all came from this kind of pessimistic view of society, this idea that people were isolated, vulnerable, and basically defenseless against these powerful new images being beamed at them.
This led to this really powerful, if kind of crude, metaphor, the hypodermic syringe model. The idea was literally that media messages are like a drug that gets injected straight into our brains, causing an immediate, predictable effect on how we act.
And for a while, it looked like they had the perfect proof. The famous War of the Worlds broadcast in 1938, where a realistic radio play about a Martian invasion caused actual widespread panic. But here's the key. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed right in the middle of the Great Depression, with the threat of a new world war hanging over everyone. It tapped into a fear that was already there.
And this simple A causes B idea has had some serious staying power. You see it here, in 1993. After the absolutely horrific murder of a toddler named James Bulger. The media's first instinct was to find a media cause, pointing the finger at the horror film Child's Play 3. As this quote shows, it was all about a gut feeling, even when it turned out there was zero evidence the killers had ever even seen the movie.
But academics pretty quickly started to see the problems with this model. It's just way too simplistic. It basically treats all of us like passive robots. It completely ignores the fact that you and I can watch the exact same movie and come away with totally different ideas because we bring our own lives and experiences to it.
Okay, so if it's not a simple injection of ideas, then what is going on? Well, the next major wave of thinking said that the media's role is actually about something much, much bigger: power, ideology, and control.
So pulling from Marxist ideas, this dominant ideology model says the media isn't just a mirror reflecting the world back at us. No, the argument is that since it's mostly owned by a wealthy elite, it actively builds a version of reality that serves their interests, and it does it so well that their worldview just starts to feel like, well, common sense.
And the way this works is through this very subtle, very clever process called hegemony. Now, this isn't about force, it's not about coercion, it's about winning our consent, getting us to agree. The media repeats certain values and ideas so often that they become the default setting, the natural, unquestioned rules we live by.
Stuart Hall's incredible study, Policing the Crisis, showed exactly how this plays out. Back in 1970s Britain, the country was in a deep economic crisis. And what happened? The media helped whip up this huge moral panic about a supposedly new crime called mugging. The panic put the blame squarely on young black men, which did two things. It distracted everyone from the real economic problems, and it gave the government a reason to crack down with tougher police.
So, this all set up a huge debate. On one side, you have the Marxist view. The media is a top-down tool of control. But on the other, you have the pluralist view, which says, hang on, the media is more like a diverse marketplace of ideas. It reflects what the public wants more than it shapes them.
And you know what? That big debate, it actually led to a completely groundbreaking shift in focus, a whole new way of thinking about the problem, which centered on this idea of the active audience.
This was revolutionary. It seems so simple, but it changed everything. Researchers just flipped the question on its head. They stopped asking, what does the media do to people? And they started asking, what do people do with the media? And just like that, the power dynamic totally shifts.
And that new question gave us something called reception analysis. The core idea here is that we're not passive sponges just soaking things up. We are active creators of meaning. We use the media as a kind of resource, a toolkit to help us figure out our lives, build our identities, and understand our place in the world.
And this idea of us actively creating meaning, well, it leads us right into our final stop, right into the bizarre, hyper-mediated world we live in today, where crime itself has become a kind of public spectacle. Postmodern thinkers say we now live in a society of the spectacle, and this leads to this weird state called hyperreality, where the line between the media image of a thing and the actual thing itself gets blurry, and then it just disappears. The representation, in a way, becomes even more real than reality.
Want a stark example of this? Just think about the 9/11 attacks. It was, without a doubt, a real-world horror, but it was also a global media event, timed for morning TV in the US, broadcast live around the world with the same shocking visual power of a Hollywood disaster movie. For the millions of us watching, that line between news and cinema just evaporated.
This idea of performance is absolutely central to a more recent field called cultural criminology. These folks study crime not just as breaking the law, but as a kind of cultural performance. It's an act packed with emotion, adrenaline, and what the sociologist Jack Katz famously called the sneaky thrills of getting away with it. It could be a way to feel alive, to feel like you're in control.
There was this perfect example of this back in the early 90s on an English housing estate. Joyriding became this ritualized performance. Young people would steal cars, tune them up, and then race them for an audience of their neighbors. This wasn't just about theft. This was theater. It was a spectacle celebrating skill and excitement, a defiant carnival on the streets.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. In our world of nonstop streaming, posting, and sharing, where we all have a high-definition camera in our pocket, where does the audience actually end and the performance begin? Are we really just watching the show anymore, or have we all become performers in this strange, modern carnival of crime?